This sermon is offered in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. In 2004, from February until April, I spent 8 weeks teaching English in a small, newly created university in Kazakhstan. The entire experience was new for me, beginning with how to spell Kazakhstan, and even where to find it on the map. We really should not be unaware of the world's 9th largest country. On arriving there, I had to learn how to walk on the streets and sidewalks that were never plowed with snow. Then once the snow began to melt, I learned from watching other pedestrians how to walk on roads that are flooded with water, spring runoff, because the sewers are all frozen solid. Even pronouncing the name of the city where I lived was a challenge. Ust-Kamenogorsk. Ust-Kamenogorsk. Try it. Ust-Kamenogorsk. It's located 400 kilometers west of China and 150 kilometers south of Russia. I confess to a certain amount of pride that, like a person born in that area, I could eventually wrap my tongue around all 5 syllables and 9 consonants of that city's name, Ust-Kamenogorsk. My task at the university was to teach aspects of English composition and literature. Since the choice of literature was left up to me, I included a few famous stories from the Bible. One of them was the parable of the son who left his father and brother behind on a farm to go out and live a wild life, using up his share of his inheritance. The university students could not understand why the father would want to welcome the son back. They all agreed and said the father should have told the boy that he had made his choice and he had to suffer the consequences. You're hungry? Do that. Their atheistic culture prevented them from having any understanding of grace or forgiveness. And the educational system would not permit me to speak about Jesus, his life, his death, and resurrection, nor about a forgiving God, who is the Father in that parable. There was much I had to learn about being in a non-Christian nation. In addition to the adventure of being in a distant, non-English speaking country, there was much satisfaction for me from 2 sources. First, working with the Russian and the Kazakh students, and second, finding ways to fill some of my considerable spare time. That's an agreeable kind of problem to have, isn't it? Too much time and not too much to do. And it's this second activity of filling my time that surprisingly connects with this service here today. That connection flashed in my mind as I read from Acts chapter 8 these words. Then Peter and John laid hands on them, that's the Samaritans, and they received the Holy Spirit. You may rightly wonder what that text had to do with my days in Kazakhstan, or how it's related to what we're doing here today, here in Antioch Community Church. One of the several ways that I filled my considerable spare time was was to concentrate on reading one book of the Bible. I selected the book of the Acts of the Apostles. On the first day in my host Commonwealth's bedroom, I began reading and studying daily about one half of a chapter of that New Testament book. And I continued to do so until almost miraculously I finished the last verse on my final day. Mind you, I did other things as well. I visited museums. I enjoyed their annual national celebrations. Went swimming, attended a few banquets and parties, and of course, I prepared lessons. Two things emerged from my Bible study that are related to what we're doing right now. One thing was that very soon in my reading of Acts, I was reminded that the Holy Spirit, the third person of the Trinity, played a major role in the life of the first century Christian church. Today's text is just one of 34 times that the author Luke mentions in his book of Acts how the Holy Spirit was guiding people to do things that they had never done before. It's no wonder that the Acts of the Apostles might better be called instead the Acts of the Holy Spirit. The second thing that emerged from those studies, and that connects even more with what we're doing today, was that the Catholic church that I attended, which by the way had simultaneous English translation, that church was very alive due to the recognized presence and work of the Holy Spirit. Both my studies of the book of Acts and my church attendance there reinforced each other and made me wonder why the Canadian Presbyterian Church often restricts the Holy Spirit to the recitation of the Apostles' Creed. I believe in the Holy Spirit, the Holy Catholic Church, and so on. Those two beliefs about the Holy Spirit, the Holy Catholic Church, are often misunderstood or often ignored, disregarded. So this afternoon, when we hear that Peter and Paul laid their hands in blessing on the Samaritans, who then received the Holy Spirit, frankly, we are mystified, almost embarrassed. What can a preacher do with a text like that? Well, he may try to explain it, and that's difficult, in fact, impossible, because the Spirit cannot be explained, not logically. You can't explain God. You ever tried that to somebody? Rather than explain, people experience the Holy Spirit. And even that experience can't easily be put into words. It's like love. It just is, or it isn't. We come to expect love within a family. It may be there, or it may not be. But we still expect love to be present in a family. Perhaps what we need is to expect the Holy Spirit to be evident in our faith, in our church life, and in our personal life. When it comes to describing, not explaining, but describing such an experience, logic suddenly collapses like a house of cards. We don't even have the words to convey what happens. So we end up talking what sounds like nonsense. Take this for example. The disciples, and we don't know how many others besides, knew of Jesus' past death, and yet they still felt his presence with them. All of them gathered in a house in Jerusalem, and this is what happened. We read of it in Acts chapter 2. They were all together in one place, and suddenly from heaven there came a sound like the rush of a violent wind, and it filled the entire house where they were sitting. Divided tongues, as of fire, appeared among them, and a tongue rested on each of them. All of them were filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak in other languages as the Spirit gave them ability. Wow. Now, all we can say for sure is that something dynamic and unexpected happened. Something truly exciting and life-giving. They became what one commentator called an incendiary fellowship. An incendiary fellowship. A community of people who were on fire for the resurrected Jesus and his life-giving power. It was as if, now this is going to sound silly, I know. It was as if flames had sprouted from their heads. That's not logical. And together they did things they never thought possible. That's not logical either. They went out and spoke in language that they didn't know they knew. Spoke about Jesus who had died on a cross. Spoke as if somehow he was still alive and with them. What an awakening that was for the astonished people in that Jerusalem house. And what an awakening for the amazed people out in the streets. Some people thought they were drunk, that they had overdosed on alcoholic spirits. But Peter said, and I think this is one of the funny things written in the Bible, Peter said, no, it's too early in the morning for that. Have to wait around later in the day. You were right about spirits, though, Peter would say, but the source of our excitement is not alcoholic spirits, it's the Holy Spirit. That little congregation in that Jerusalem house expanded. And why? Because they had something to share, something to give to others. That's one essential purpose of congregations like this. They have something to share, whether it be the good news of the gospel, or food, or love. Keep it all to yourself and you lose it, as so many churches are discovering. I encountered a reflection of that enthusiasm in the Kazakh church in Ust-Kamenogorsk. A burning desire to tell others what God had done and is still doing through a living Jesus Christ, reconciling enemies, offering hope to the despairing, and giving confidence to the fearful, and providing new life to those who thought that they were as good as dead. In downtown Jerusalem, something did happen that day, just like the echoes and reflections I heard and saw in that downtown Kazakh church. The congregation there was thriving, despite the fact that it is located in the midst of a faith-denying, atheistic culture. Remember, it was a culture that would not or could not believe that a sinful son who squandered time, talents, and inheritance should be welcomed back by a loving father. The Kazakh members felt they had news of a resurrected Jesus Christ for their neighbors and their co-workers and their friends. And they demonstrated a willingness to help the destitute, the lonely, the hungry among whom they lived. So that congregation